Ford fans are not going to like this one, because Ford's upcoming cheapest $21K pickup is already getting dragged before it even hits dealer lots. We're talking about the Ford Maverick, the truck that was supposed to be the people's pickup, the budget hero, the anti-inflation answer to overpriced midsize trucks like the Toyota Tacoma, Chevy Colorado, and Nissan Frontier, and according to Consumer Reports, this thing might be a rolling disappointment waiting to happen. Here's where it gets ugly fast. Consumer Reports isn't impressed by the Maverick's long-term reliability outlook, and that's a massive red flag for a truck being sold as a cheap workhorse. They're warning buyers that cutting the price this low means corners are being cut everywhere you can't see, from interior materials to drivetrain durability, and once the warranty runs out, that cheap 21K truck could turn into a money pit real quick. Then there's the powertrain criticism, and it's brutal. The base Ford Maverick's engine is being called underwhelming for real truck tasks, especially when compared to rivals like the Toyota Tacoma or even the Hyundai Santa Cruz, which Consumer Reports says delivers a better balance of performance and refinement. Translation: this so-called pickup may look tough, but when you actually load it up or hook a trailer, it starts feeling more like a compromised crossover with a bed. Interior quality is another area where Consumer Reports absolutely torched Ford. They point out that the Maverick's cabin feels cheap even by budget standards, with hard plastics everywhere, minimal sound insulation, and tech that already feels outdated. Meanwhile, buyers spending a bit more on trucks like the Chevy Colorado or even a base Ram 1500 get a noticeably better driving experience, which makes the Maverick's value proposition look shaky at best. And here's the part that really stings Ford. Consumer Reports straight up questions who this truck is actually for. It's not rugged enough for serious truck buyers, not refined enough for daily drivers, and not reliable enough, according to early data, to justify jumping in just because the price is low. They even suggest that shoppers chasing the cheapest sticker price are the ones most likely to regret it, especially when resale value and long-term ownership costs are factored in. So when you hear 21K pickup, it sounds like a steal, but Consumer Reports is basically screaming that only impatient buyers who ignore the fine print are lining up for this thing. Ford wanted the Maverick to disrupt the market, but instead, it may be disrupting buyers' bank accounts after a few years of ownership, especially when alternatives like the Toyota Tacoma Hybrid, the upcoming Chevy Colorado Refresh, and even used full-size trucks start to look like smarter plays. And that's where the real question starts to form about whether Ford rushed this truck to market just to hit a headline price instead of building something that can actually survive real-world use. Because once you dig deeper into the Consumer Reports data, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore, and it raises serious doubts about whether this truck is a bargain or a trap designed to lure first-time buyers who don't realize what they're signing up for until it's far too late and the repair bills start stacking up right after the honeymoon phase ends. And the reality of owning the cheapest pickup in America finally sets in when the engine, transmission, and suspension are pushed beyond the light-duty lifestyle Ford quietly expects most owners to stick to, and that's exactly where things begin to unravel as Consumer Reports continues breaking down why this truck could end up being one of the most regretted purchases in the budget truck segment as more data comes in, and real owners start reporting the same issues over and over again, especially when compared side by side with trucks that cost just a little more but deliver far more in terms of durability, comfort, and peace of mind, which leads directly into the biggest mistake buyers are making right now when they see that 21K price tag and assume it means unbeatable value without realizing what they're actually giving up to get there, and why Consumer Reports believes that mindset is exactly what Ford is counting on as this truck rolls toward launch, and the hype machine keeps spinning faster than the facts can catch up to it. And that's where things get even more concerning when you look at how this strategy has played out before with other cheap vehicles that promised affordability but delivered frustration, depreciation, and disappointment long after the initial excitement faded and the truth finally caught up with the marketing. And that mindset is exactly what Consumer Reports is warning people about, because history shows us how this story usually ends when a manufacturer chases a headline price instead of long-term quality. We've seen it before with budget trims that look great on paper but fall apart in ownership, and Consumer Reports is hinting that the Ford Maverick could be heading down that same road if buyers don't slow down and really think this through. One of the biggest concerns they highlight is resale value, and this is where cheap trucks really get exposed. Consumer Reports points out that trucks like the Toyota Tacoma hold their value insanely well, even after years of abuse, while budget-focused models tend to tank fast once reliability questions start circulating. If the Maverick develops a reputation for problems, that $21K entry price won't matter when it's worth pennies compared to a Tacoma or even a used Ford Ranger just a few years down the line. Then there's the build quality issue, which Consumer Reports doesn't sugarcoat at all. They mention inconsistent panel gaps, questionable fit and finish, and components that feel like they were designed to meet cost targets, not durability standards. That might not bother someone during a quick test drive, but after months of daily driving, rough roads, and real work use, those little shortcuts start turning into big annoyances, rattles, and repairs that pile up fast. Consumer Reports also throws shade at Ford's strategy of marketing the Maverick as a lifestyle truck rather than a true pickup. They argue that trucks like the Chevy Colorado, Nissan Frontier, and Toyota Tacoma are built with a clear mission: do truck things without excuses, while the Maverick tries to please everyone and ends up fully satisfying almost no one. It's too soft for job sites, too noisy for long commutes, and too compromised to justify choosing it purely on price. And let's talk about towing and payload, because this is where the illusion really cracks. Consumer Reports notes that once you actually use the Maverick for hauling or towing near its limits, performance drops off fast, acceleration suffers, fuel efficiency tanks, and overall confidence disappears, especially when compared to more traditional pickups. That's a big deal because most buyers don't want to admit they'll need that capability until the moment they actually do. What really makes this situation blow up is how Consumer Reports frames the buyer profile. They strongly suggest that first-time truck buyers are the most vulnerable here, the people upgrading from sedans or compact SUVs who see pickup truck and 21K in the same sentence and think they're beating the system. According to Consumer Reports, those buyers are often the least prepared for the compromises they're about to live with every single day. Meanwhile, when you step back and look at the alternatives, the Maverick's value starts looking questionable. Spend a little more and you're in a base Toyota Tacoma with proven reliability, go used, and you can land a full-size Ford F-150 or Ram 1500 with better capability and comfort. Even the Hyundai Santa Cruz, which isn't pretending to be a hardcore truck, gets credit from Consumer Reports for being more honest about what it is and who it's for. Consumer Reports is basically saying this: the Maverick isn't terrible, but the hype around it is dangerous. Ford sold the idea of a cheap pickup at the perfect time, when buyers are desperate for affordability, but desperation leads to bad decisions. And once the excitement wears off, owners may start asking why they didn't just wait, save a little more, or choose a truck with a longer track record of reliability and resale strength. And this is where things start getting uncomfortable for Ford, because as more Mavericks hit the road, Consumer Reports will keep collecting owner data, repair reports, and long-term reliability scores, and if those numbers don't improve, this truck's reputation could slide fast, especially in a segment where trust matters more than marketing. And once that trust is gone, no amount of low pricing can bring it back, which leads directly into the next major warning Consumer Reports is quietly hinting at when it comes to how manufacturers respond when early issues start showing up, and whether Ford is actually prepared to fix them, or if buyers are about to become unpaid beta testers for a truck that was rushed out to win headlines instead of loyalty. And that unpaid beta tester idea is where Consumer Reports really turns up the heat, because they've seen this pattern too many times to ignore it. Early buyers jump in, issues start popping up, software updates and recalls roll out slowly, and suddenly the cheapest truck in America becomes the most inconvenient one to live with. Consumer Reports is questioning whether Ford is prepared to support the Maverick long-term the way it does proven models like the Ford F-150 or even the Ford Ranger, or if this truck is going to be quietly left to fend for itself once the initial hype wave dies down. They also point out something buyers don't like to hear but absolutely need to hear. Cheap trucks attract aggressive cost cutting in areas that don't show up on a spec sheet. Suspension components, bushings, cooling systems, and electronics are where problems often surface later, not during a shiny launch review. Consumer Reports warns that once mileage climbs, the Maverick could start revealing why it costs so much less than a Toyota Tacoma or a Chevy Colorado, and by then, buyers are already locked in. Another uncomfortable truth Consumer Reports brings up is dealership behavior. When demand is high and supply is tight, that 21K's Ford Maverick doesn't stay 21K for long. Mark markups, forced add-ons, and inflated financing erase the price advantage almost instantly, and suddenly you're paying Tacoma money for a truck that doesn't deliver Tacoma-level reliability or capability. Consumer Reports basically ask the question no one wants to answer. If the price advantage disappears, why would anyone still choose this truck? Fuel economy is another area where expectations and reality may collide. Yes, the Maverick is marketed as efficient, but Consumer Reports notes that once you load it up, tow anything, or drive it hard, those numbers drop fast. Meanwhile, newer powertrains and trucks like the Toyota Tacoma Hybrid or even efficient trims of the Ford F-150 start to look more appealing when you factor in real-world use instead of marketing numbers. What really escalates this whole situation is how Consumer Reports compares regret rates. They track owner satisfaction over time, and their concern is that Maverick buyers may start souring once the novelty wears off. The small bed, limited off-road capability, and budget interior stop feeling quirky and start feeling limiting. Trucks like the Nissan Frontier and Chevy Colorado may cost more up front, but Consumer Reports suggests they deliver fewer "I wish I'd known that earlier" moments down the road. And then there's the psychological trap. Consumer Reports calls it price anchoring. Once buyers fixate on that 21K number, everything else feels expensive by comparison, even when it's objectively better. Ford knows this, and Consumer Reports implies that the Maverick's biggest strength isn't engineering, it's perception. It looks like a deal, sounds like a deal, and feels like a deal right up until ownership reality sets in. This is why Consumer Reports keeps hammering the same message. The cheapest truck is rarely the smartest truck. They're not saying nobody should buy the Ford Maverick, but they are saying that buyers who ignore long-term data, reliability trends, and resale history are walking straight into disappointment. Trucks are supposed to last, and Consumer Reports is questioning whether Ford built the Maverick to last a decade or just long enough to survive its warranty period. And as more owners rack up miles, post complaints, and report repairs, Consumer Reports will be watching closely, because this is the exact moment when the truth usually surfaces. Early praise fades, long-term ownership stories take over, and the real cost of a cheap truck finally becomes clear. Consumer Reports hints that the Maverick could face a wave of complaints once mileage climbs past the honeymoon phase, especially if minor issues start stacking up into major frustrations that dealers struggle to resolve quickly. Another angle Consumer Reports digs into is safety and driver confidence. While the Maverick checks the basic boxes, they argue it doesn't inspire the same planted, confident feel you get from trucks like the Toyota Tacoma, Chevy Colorado, or even a base Ford Ranger. That matters more than people realize, because trucks are often driven loaded, in bad weather, or on rough roads, and when a vehicle feels light and stressed, drivers notice it immediately. They also question Ford's long-term commitment to updates and improvements. With rumors constantly swirling about refreshes, trims, and future electrified versions, Consumer Reports wonders if early buyers will be left behind with outdated tech and unresolved quirks while Ford moves on to the next headline-grabbing variant. That's a tough pill to swallow when you bought in early thinking you scored the deal of the decade. And let's not ignore the comparison to used trucks, which Consumer Reports brings up again and again. For the same money, or just a bit more, you can get a used Toyota Tacoma, a well-kept Ford F-150, or a Ram 1500 that offers more space, more capability, and a proven track record. Consumer Reports suggests that many Maverick buyers may eventually realize they traded long-term satisfaction for short-term excitement. What makes this situation even more explosive is timing. The truck market is changing fast, prices are stabilizing, and more options are coming back onto dealer lots. Consumer Reports warns that buying a compromised truck just to save money right now could age poorly once incentives return and better trucks become more affordable. In that scenario, the Maverick's main advantage disappears almost overnight. They also raise concerns about how this truck will age visually and mechanically. Cheap interiors don't age gracefully, and Consumer Reports has seen countless vehicles lose their appeal once scratches, fading, and rattles start creeping in. A Toyota Tacoma with battle scars looks rugged. A budget-focused Maverick with worn plastics just looks tired, and that perception hits resale value hard. Consumer Reports doesn't hold back when it comes to expectations versus reality. Ford's marketing makes the Maverick look like a revolutionary pickup, but Consumer Reports frames it as an experiment, and experiments are risky when you're the one spending your hard-earned money. They suggest that buyers who go in with eyes wide open might tolerate the compromises, but buyers chasing a miracle deal are the ones most likely to feel burned. And the more Consumer Reports compares ownership data between the Maverick and its competitors, the clearer the pattern becomes. Trucks that cost more upfront often end up costing less in the long run, while bargain trucks slowly drain wallets through depreciation, inconvenience, and regret. That's not exciting to hear, but it's exactly the kind of reality check Consumer Reports is known for. And as this data continues to evolve, as more Mavericks rack up real-world miles, and as more owners start voicing their experiences, the narrative around Ford's cheapest pickup could shift dramatically, especially if those stories start echoing the same concerns Consumer Reports is already flagging, because once that tipping point is reached, the conversation around this truck changes from, "Can you believe how cheap it is?" to "Why didn't anyone warn us sooner?" And that's the moment where Ford's 21K headline turns into a cautionary tale that future buyers will study closely before making the same mistake, which brings us straight into the next issue. Consumer Reports is quietly pointing toward when it comes to maintenance costs, dealer service quality, and how quickly small problems can snowball into ownership nightmares if they aren't addressed early, especially in a vehicle designed to hit a price point rather than exceed expectations. And maintenance is where Consumer Reports says the real pain often begins, because cheap vehicles don't stay cheap once they start aging. Routine service on the Ford Maverick may look affordable on paper, but Consumer Reports warns that frequent visits for small issues can add up fast, especially when parts availability becomes inconsistent or dealers are overwhelmed by volume. What starts as a minor annoyance quickly turns into lost time, frustration, and unexpected bills. They also bring up dealer experience, which is something most buyers don't think about until it's too late. Consumer Reports suggests that Maverick owners may find themselves battling long wait times, misdiagnosed issues, and inconsistent fixes, particularly if the truck develops common problems that service departments aren't fully prepared to handle yet. Meanwhile, owners of trucks like the Toyota Tacoma or Nissan Frontier benefit from years of dealer familiarity and proven repair processes. Another key point Consumer Reports hammers is durability under real-world stress. Light-duty trucks often look fine in normal driving, but once you start throwing tools in the bed, hauling materials, or driving on rough surfaces daily, weaknesses show up fast. Consumer Reports questions whether the Maverick's suspension, brakes, and cooling systems are truly built for repeated abuse or just occasional weekend use. And then there's the issue of expectations versus reality again. Ford's branding leans heavily on the word truck, but Consumer Reports implies that buyers expecting traditional truck toughness may feel misled. When you compare it side by side with a Chevy Colorado or a Toyota Tacoma, the Maverick's limitations become impossible to ignore, especially for buyers who actually need a truck and not just the image of one. Consumer Reports also points out how quickly public perception can shift. All it takes is a few widely shared owner horror stories, and suddenly confidence in the vehicle collapses. We've seen it happen before, and Consumer Reports believes the Maverick is vulnerable to this exact scenario because its appeal is so heavily tied to price. Once that confidence cracks, resale values and demand can drop sharply. They even question Ford's long-term strategy for the Maverick nameplate. Is this truck going to be continuously improved and supported, or will it become an afterthought as Ford focuses on higher-margin vehicles like the F-150 Lightning and future electrified trucks? Consumer Reports warns that buyers could be left with a vehicle that stops receiving meaningful updates or improvements sooner than expected. Another uncomfortable reality Consumer Reports raises is how buyers justify the purchase after the fact. People tend to defend cheap purchases even when problems appear, which delays accountability and allows issues to grow. By the time owners admit the truck isn't meeting expectations, they're often past the easiest exit points financially. And when Consumer Reports zooms out and looks at total cost of ownership, the Maverick's advantage keeps shrinking. Depreciation, maintenance, insurance, and opportunity cost all start stacking up, and suddenly the cheap truck isn't winning anymore. That's where trucks like the Toyota Tacoma shine, because their higher upfront cost is offset by long-term stability and strong resale. Consumer Reports isn't trying to scare everyone away, but they are drawing a very clear line. If you want the cheapest way into a pickup-shaped vehicle, the Maverick might check that box. But if you want reliability, longevity, and confidence, Consumer Reports strongly suggests looking elsewhere or waiting to see how this truck performs over several years. And as this warning continues to circulate, as more data rolls in, and as Ford responds, or doesn't respond, to early feedback, the Maverick story is still being written, and the next chapter may be the most revealing one yet, because because it's where marketing meets ownership reality, where spreadsheets meet real-world wear and tear, and where buyers finally learn whether Ford's cheapest truck was a bold move or a costly miscalculation that Consumer Reports saw coming long before the rest of the market caught on, which leads directly into the final concern they're hinting at involving long-term reliability scores, owner trust, and how fast a must-buy can turn into a never-again vehicle once that trust is broken and the honeymoon phase officially ends, and the true cost of chasing the lowest price becomes impossible to ignore. And that final concern is the one that can permanently define a vehicle's legacy: long-term reliability scores. Consumer Reports makes it clear that once a truck earns a reputation for being troublesome, it's almost impossible to shake. Buyers talk, forums light up, resale values collapse, and suddenly a truck that launched with massive hype becomes one that dealers can't move without heavy discounts. Consumer Reports is warning that the Ford Maverick is walking dangerously close to that line if Ford doesn't address early warning signs fast. Owner trust is everything in the truck world. People buy trucks expecting them to last years, sometimes decades. Consumer Reports emphasizes that when trust breaks, buyers don't just switch models, they switch brands. A bad experience with a Maverick doesn't just hurt that truck, it can push buyers toward Toyota Tacomas, Chevy Colorados, Nissan Frontiers, or even Ram 1500s for life. That's a massive risk for Ford, especially when the Maverick was supposed to bring new buyers into the brand. And this is where the phrase "only idiots will buy" starts making brutal sense. Consumer Reports isn't calling buyers stupid, but they are saying that ignoring data, history, and warning signs just to chase the cheapest sticker price is a mistake smart buyers don't make. Buying a truck isn't about winning a price war, it's about minimizing regret, and Consumer Reports believes regret is exactly what many Maverick buyers may be setting themselves up for. And as Consumer Reports continues to track real-world ownership data, the Maverick's future will be decided not by ads or hype, but by miles driven, repairs logged, and owners deciding whether they'd buy it again. That's the ultimate test, and it's one the Maverick hasn't passed yet. So before anyone rushes to the dealership chasing the cheapest pickup in America, Consumer Reports is essentially saying slow down, look past the price, and understand what you're trading away. Because in the truck world, shortcuts usually come back to haunt you, and the buyers who ignore that lesson are the ones who end up paying for it long after the excitement fades and the reality of owning Ford's cheapest pickup finally sinks in.